Hi and welcome back to the Action Ecology Regenerative Farming Tour of Aotearoa, New Zealand. In this episode, I visit Greg and Rachel Hart at Mangarara Station in Hawke's Bay, where I get to spend time with Greg walking the farm and really getting to hear a bit more from him around his story of what they do and why they do it. I've been looking forward to coming to Mangarara Station because I've been really interested to see how Greg has incorporated agroforestry into his operation and really harnessing the power of that to increase the diversity and productivity of his landscape and his whole operation. So come with me, hope you enjoy this episode, and let's hear from Greg.
So this is Mangarara Station, 600 hectare sheep and beef farm in central Hawke's Bay near the community of Elsthorpe. You know, we've come from a very traditional farming background of sheep and beef, and we're just trying to take in all the information we can about the changes that are coming at us in the future, and trying to adapt and read that. I guess one of the big drivers is the news around climate change and the understanding that the way we look after our land, and we've got massive potential to sequester carbon, I guess firstly through replanting a whole lot of trees, and so we're trying to integrate silver pasture right throughout the whole farmer operation, matching the different land classes to different sort of tree species and different uses. That also means that setting some room aside for nature, and so there's already been about 20 odd hectares has been replanted in native vegetation, and that's just been set aside as a restoration project. And the latest venture is around the silver pasture, where we're planting trees in rows through pastured paddocks. We've planted trees at a density where they will qualify for a Kyoto forest, being more than 5 metres high and have the potential to get to over 30% canopy cover. We feel that that's going to be a good thing to do. I guess the expectation is that we'll be able to maintain our stocking numbers on that, and we're going to be losing very little land as far as productive grazing land, but we're adding a whole lot of biodiversity, but also adding shade and shelter, because New Zealand's opportunity is to produce high quality food for the people on the planet that can afford it, as long as we're looking after our own people first, of course. But and they're going to be expecting some really high animal welfare standards, and so part of that in a hot, dry, arid Hawke's Bay climate is that those animals have access to shade in the summertime. And of course then there's going to be the benefits we're expecting of them breaking the drying westerly winds that we get through the equinox period here, and so the expectation is it will hold a whole lot more moisture in the soil, which will hopefully increase pasture production between the rows. So I guess the other thing is, although I'm driven by a lot of philosophical and environmental drivers, the reality is as the emissions trading scheme in New Zealand stands at the moment, my calculations, even based on a $30 per tonne for carbon, is it will be earning twice as much from those trees per hectare than we do off our sheep and beef farming operation. So, those trees at the moment at that carbon price, between year 5 and year 10, will be gaining pretty close to another $1,000 per hectare per year just from the carbon sequestration. And I guess, if we're looking at our return through the animal farming, then that's just adding to, as well as building in that resilience, biodiversity, nutrient cycling. So we've not only planted those trees for carbon, but in between those trees we've put in hazelnuts, so we're expecting to get a crop of nuts for ourselves or for sale, and then also use Takasaki tree lucerne or a Japanese fodder willow. So again, between those trees there's going to be fodder for the animals to eat. And the way we've gone about doing it is we've planted the trees in rows, and we've just put a single hot wire on the outside of the trees, so the animals can graze under the wire and still harvest the pasture that's growing under there, but they can't reach in and actually damage the tree. I mean, this system here is being done with, and this interesting thing is around partnerships, and these trees have been paid for by the James Cook Hotel in Wellington, and a relationship was struck up there with the management and staff, and each year they were coming to the farm and staying in the lodge, and you were planting a lot of native trees. And I thought, well guys, actually we have planted a lot of native trees on the farm already, and I think our future's all going to be about food. And so I said, how about we get some food production trees into the landscape? And so we had a guy, Stefan Sipkowiak from Canada, come and visit us a few years back, and he put out a film called The Permaculture Orchard, and that is using a system he calls NAP. So you've got a nitrogen fixing tree, that actually looks like an apricot, and then a plum, and then another nitrogen fixing tree, an almond, a pear, and so it's just going along like that. So nitrogen fixing trees and production fruit trees or nut trees in the row. So
And you can do all this without even taking a massive hit to your grazing.
yeah, totally. Yeah. So at this stage, just while some of these trees get bigger, we don't put sheep in here too often because I guess the sheep would graze on the lower trees. But once they get up to this stage, they're big enough. The sheep will graze underneath the wire, so they can graze all the grass underneath there. And we're predominantly farming cattle now, and the cattle are grazing the rows between the trees.
And so, was it like a huge amount of costs for things like fencing and trying to get trees in and all that sort of stuff, or is it?
It's minimal, and I guess as far as an investment, the returns come back really quickly. Again, going back to the silver pasture trees, those trees, we're buying for about $3.50 as a bare-rooted tree at sort of 1.2 to 1.5 metres high. Planting them is really quick and easy, just digging a hole and plonking them in and stamping them down. And so, 70 trees per hectare we've been planting, and $3.50. So what's that come to? Less than $250, and then a single wire each side and some fiberglass posts and a couple of wooden posts at each end. So it really isn't a big expense, and through the carbon income, you'll get that back pretty quickly. But I think we would have done that even if there wasn't any carbon income, because just of the animal welfare, and I think the benefits that we're going to get through the nutrient cycling and options for animals have fodder through droughts.
So tell me a little bit about some of the considerations for how you do things and decisions you've made on this farm, because of where you are in the context.
Yeah, well, back in, I think it was about 2015, we did a holistic management course, and so that's has sort of given us a framework for making decisions. And again, it's just, I guess, a passion and for the future, and lots of learning. And it's an incredible time that we live in at the moment. Pretty much every time I'm out on the farm with an hour or two to spare, I've got some headphones on and listening to the latest podcasts or listening to books on Audible. And so we've got access to all of these most informed people around the world who are plugging into the latest science and development. And so it's just an incredible opportunity to learn, and then taking those learnings and applying it in our context. And our context, to put it really simply in here, is about optimizing life, and that is just starts with the soil, trying to have the healthiest soil that we possibly can, optimize the biology and life in our soil, leading on to a diversity of animals that we have on the farm, diversity of plants, and it ends up with a whole diversity of people that come and visit us. And we're just finding, just with this approach and sort of stepping in the direction of working with Mother Nature, that she just comes storming back, and like so we're seeing with our taller grazing management that we use on the farm, and 112,000 trees that we've planted now in the last 12 years, creating habitat for birds. It's just like life exploding. We've got the insects, we've got the birds, and you've got the people, and it just becomes a great place to be.
And how has doing all this stuff actually helped your operation? I mean, having biodiversity or having all this stuff coming back, is that?
Well, I guess part of this was all about trying to connect people back to the land through their food, and so we're direct marketing meat from the farm, and it's not just a marketing story. It's because we're passionate about what we do, and we really believe in it, and there's a lot of people out there that understand we've got some pretty serious challenges happening right now, and the way that they can sort of support that regeneration of biodiversity and healthy food, and that is by buying their food from farmers and having that relationship. and building that trust over time. And so um, while it's what we enjoy and we get a kick out of it and it feels like the right thing to be doing at the moment, it is helping us sell our meat and receiving a premium through the butchers. We need to be doing this all over the planet right now, and in everybody's own context in that. But this landscape, we look around now, and New Zealand is one of the last countries on the planet to be inhabited by humans, and in that time we've just totally transformed this landscape, and the hills still look the same, and that lake was still here 1,000 years ago, but all the trees and um, flora around the place has completely changed. And so we're trying to sort of bring back that balance, obviously not turn it back to what it looked like 1,000 years ago, because we've got a whole lot of people to feed now and we've got to find our place in it, but it is trying to restore that balance with what we did, and leave place for nature and all those natural cycles.
What are some of the specific site considerations that you've made in the way that you've gone about doing this?
Well, potential, really is around getting trees back into the landscape, and again, if we're learning from nature, um, this countryside would have been covered in forest 1,000 years ago, and it was pretty much almost completely denuded. We've got photos of 100 years ago what it looks like, and there was hardly a tree standing, and so we went way too far in that direction. So now it's trying to swing back, and just what adding trees might do to the hydrological cycles around this landscape. We are in a dry environment, but there's enough science and research around that says when you reintroduce trees, what it does to bringing increasing rainfall, and so if we did this on scale, then I don't really see any downsides. I think the silver pasture option is a massive opportunity for New Zealand, and because we are a pastoral agriculture nation largely, um, something like 11 million hectares or something of pastoral land in New Zealand, and my calculations are that if we sort of space planted trees like we're doing here, on scale, then New Zealand could be sequestering twice as much carbon as what we emit as a country. And I guess the opportunity is there. The solutions are here as far as mitigating climate change, and we don't need any new technologies, and it's got all these benefits to animal welfare and our current production, and so it just does seem a bit of a no-brainer to me.
How is regenerative agriculture and what you're doing here different from the so-called conventional approach?
So what we're doing, which is broadly termed as regenerative agriculture, for want of a better word, or ecological agriculture, um, people sort of come at it from a whole lot of different angles. I guess initially ours was around sustainability and resilience. Understanding that New Zealand pastoral agriculture is the backbone of our economy is largely based on bringing phosphate fertilizers from North Africa, and it just didn't seem like a sustainable system to base our economy on, let alone the future of food. And so that sort of sent us on this almost 20-year journey now to try and continue to produce food without the high input systems. And while there's no silver bullets that we've found yet, and I'm still getting my head around the whole fertility management, and we still do use a little bit of phosphate, albeit not from Morocco or West Sahara, but we're using lines, and we're still trying to find our way. But again, looking to nature, what we're trying to do is, with our grazing systems, having taller pastures, the theory being that the roots are going deeper into the soil, and we're not eating all the grass right down to the base. That's giving us some animal health benefits, because I think our animals aren't getting parasites as much as what would normally be expected, and it certainly gives us a whole lot more resilience through droughts. Also returning and trampling a whole lot of the carbon or the pastures back onto the soil surface to try and complete the circle of it. So we have dramatically reduced the amount of fertiliser that we're putting in, and still maintaining production at this point, and we'll continue to monitor that.
And has that sort of approach been, really helpful throughout these drier spells?
Definitely. So, I mean, last year was a pretty big drought in Hawke's Bay, and we got through that without having to buy any silage or baleage or hay in, and we don't use any nitrogen fertilizers, and we still had a very healthy profit for the year. And so, just it can be done. We don't need all these inputs, and we don't make hay or supplements on the farm, and that's just a thing that we've done around trying to get fossil fuels out of our production system. So obviously there's a lot of energy involved in running tractors and baling up hay or wrapping up bales, and so we've just cut that out of our system, and we carry a lot of longer grass and taller pastures into the drier summer periods, and that generally gets us through. It can get tight at times, but we're aware of it, we're monitoring, and if we have to adjust our stock numbers accordingly, then we do.
And so, what are some of the, I guess, challenges or obstacles that you've had to overcome on this kind of, journey to where you are now?
It really is just about, learning, and again, there's massive opportunities at the moment for people to learn, and there's support networks here now that weren't here 10, 15 years ago. There is a Hawke's Bay Regenerative Ag group. We've got Quorum Sense in New Zealand, and just again, YouTube, whatever. There's just massive information. So it's I guess having the ability to work through that information, and probably the best thing is actually to go and visit another farmer, see what they're doing on their farm, and that really grounds it, so you can really see it and how they're applying it, which is a great thing to do, and there's plenty of opportunities to do that. And then I guess it's just having the courage to perhaps do something a little bit different to what your neighbours are doing, and that's probably can be a major stumbling block, and just daring to be a little bit different.
In this journey of yours, have there ever been any sort of like real light bulb moments for you?
No, it's just been really a constant learning, unfolding. It's just adding, as you learn more and applying it, and sometimes it takes a wee while for the penny to drop. You do have to hear things a number of times, and just and the information's evolving too, like the grazing. The first sort of learnings I did around that, over 10 years ago now, was pretty basic, and you make lots of mistakes, and the thing is trying to learn from those mistakes.
If someone's starting out in this, or interested in starting out in it, what do you think is the sort of the key to getting going, to making it work?
I think if you're interested in regenerative agriculture and learning what it is, and perhaps how you might be able to apply it on your place, and then I think the best thing for a farmer is to probably go and talk to another farmer who's already doing it and kind of made that shift, because generally the people you find are pretty enthusiastic and pretty happy to share. So that would be my recommendation. Obviously there is a whole lot of books and information and videos and that now to help you gain a bigger understanding, but I think you can't beat actually getting your boots out on the land and talking to another farmer, and hopefully getting a bit of inspiration. We say we're learning from nature, and imagine this land here actually obviously didn't have any cloven-hoofed animals on it, and so that is a bit of a variation where I guess we have these European roots, and we have just basically largely implemented a European farming system onto our landscape here, and so getting trees back into the system is important, but we are going to be maintaining for the foreseeable future. We have no plans to change with our sheep and cattle operation on the farm, because we do produce food, and that is what drives our income largely. There is a number of income streams on the farm, but this land here with no irrigation, we can't really grow crops. We have small areas where we're growing vegetables, and that is with water coming out of dams, so we can do that. But on the broad acre, 600 hectare farm, we produce food by growing grass and pasture, and those animals converting it into protein. And hopefully, while they're doing that, they're also doing that environmental service of completing that whole carbon cycle and the sequestration of carbon from the atmosphere and through photosynthesis of the plants and then through the animal and just keeping that cycle going. And so animals are an important part of this system, because we would be producing very little if we were just relying on trying to grow our crops without irrigation and water.
So to that point then, what are all the things that you're producing off this farm?
So we have diversified a bit, and again that's around a bit of a passion and self-sufficiency, but also the potential to create other income streams on the farm. So we've got a little dairy here, and so we've been milking about 30 cows through the spring-summer period, because again, to create another income stream on the farm, we rear calves through the spring, and I guess we use permaculture principles and where things have to have multiple purposes. And so if we think about our dairy, then we've got at least 7 different uses or purposes for that dairy shed, and one is to create an income for somebody rearing calves through the spring. 2, it provides milk for the people living on the farm. 3, we fatten pigs using that milk, and again trying to get fossil fuels out of food and understanding that pig and poultry production is largely based on growing animals using annual crops to feed them, to grow them. So pretty much, with a few exceptions, we're growing pigs with on pasture and milk, which is just a derivative of a perennial grass system. We do soak our chicken grain that we do buy for our hens, in our portable hen house that we're shifting around the farm. We do soak their grain in milk to give it a bit of extra protein. Then there is an education role, like part of what we want to do on this farm is connecting with people, and a lot, especially children that get out here, and the best thing is seeing the animals. And so having a shed where you can get up close to dairy cows and taste the milk is pretty cool. We've got a lodge on the farm, and so it works in with the tourism, because again just people coming from the farm want that experience, and where you can get close to the animals. It's really easy in a dairy shed. Pigs are pretty friendly, so you can give them a scratch and you can lift up, pick up a hen. So all those things are serving multiple purposes, as well as producing really good food. And I guess the last one with the dairy shed is that we do pick up any manure that falls while we're in the shed and put it into a worm farm, and so that's part of completing the nutrient cycle there as well.
Not to mention all the tree crops.
Yeah, and then growing the tree crops, although they're not on a commercial scale, and like I said, these trees have been planted with funding from the Grand Chancellor James Cook Hotel in Wellington, and so the agreement is there that these are for sharing with people that visit the farm, and surpluses are shared with the community and those in need. And so we've got a little shed down the end of our road where we call it the sharing shed, and so any surplus produce gets put down the corner there, and people can just pick it up and help themselves. Last year we didn't buy any supplements, we didn't use any nitrogen, and we had a very profitable year.
I guess this was our sort of reserve bank for if it didn't rain, that we had all this kind of feed stacked up. Now that it has rained, we're just kind of using it.
Yeah.
Try and get it grazed down, and hopefully growing productively for the autumn and set us up for the winter.
Just the way our system works, supplying butchers all year round, we've got to have fat cattle all year round. One of the indicators that we do is that you shouldn't have grass that's got still squared off where it was grazed last.
Yeah.
And so we had a mob of calves go through here last, and so that was only a couple of weeks ago. But we're getting a bit tight on feed at the moment. We've just dried these cows off just this week, and so we don't want to feed them too much. We're a little bit short on our choices, but I guess you can see here that the way we graze it is around not eating everything off. If you look down here, or even perhaps we go over here, that although we've got, what some people would call a weed, with these dock sticking up, at certain times of the year we find that's the first plant that the animals will go and eat. And so it's just doing its job, and there's probably a bit of compaction or wetness here, and so it's just getting its big root down into the soil. So we're quite happy to let it do its thing and run its course. But we have got quite a lot of ground that has been laid down on the ground, and so we are covering the soil. And after a very dry sort of last couple of months, we've just had 50 millimetres of rain this week, and so that is all just soaked into the ground. And and with this cover over there, it's protected from the sun. I mean, we were probably back at 26, 27 degrees today, baking hot, and but this soil is covered and protected by all that land, and this here, this sort of thatch that's on the top, by the end of winter it will be completely disappeared, and we'll be just starting with fresh grass again. So we would not normally be grazing this again so soon. You can see these tips that have still been, where they've been squared off, where they were grazed by the last animals through here, which was just a mob of calves. So this is not what we do, and we're normally waiting for the grass to get back to at least its 3-leaf stage, where it's mature, and then we'd be putting the animals in to graze it. But I guess the other interesting thing is that just with this mulch that's laid down on the ground, you can just see how the clover's coming up through it, and that's pretty typical of a lot of what the farm's like at the moment, having just been trampled and grazed over the summertime, and having that layer put down on the soil. You do just find that the clover just comes up through it, and given decent rainfall, you'll just get a really massive clover. And the other thing is, because these seeds, some of these plants have got quite mature, there will be quite a lot of seed on the ground, and with rain we will get another strike of new grass coming up. There's nothing struck there yet, but there's a lot of seed on the ground, and so it will all come up again.
And so, I mean, do you kind of have a rule of thumb in terms of how much dry matter or whatever that you want to have ahead of you before you go in, or leave behind you when you go?
We still do feed budgets, and we will calculate what our we'll do a pasture cover on the farm, so we are still doing a feed budget. We're using a program called FarmX, which is pretty good for modelling stock requirements and matching it as a feed budget, but also that will calculate what the returns you're getting from your various classes of animals, and how much they're eating, and so it's pretty detailed. So that's sort of the feed budget that we'll do every couple of months, and then we're using some holistic planning charts for planning our grazing rotations, and so they are from the Savory Institute, their grazing charts. It's adaptive because you're responding to what the pasture growth is doing, and planning your rotation and how long it's going to be before you return to that paddock based on historical data, but you're constantly adjusting it and monitoring and adapting. A couple of times a year we'll do a feed budget, looking 6 months in advance. We'll do one probably start of spring, and another one sort of in the autumn, going through those periods. And then we really are just using our planning and just the rest periods between grazings is what's driving that. And then when we get a surplus, as we did this last spring, because we've just had a phenomenal growth period, slightly understocked coming out of last year's drought, and then I think we got something like 150 mils of rain in November, and so it just went whoosh and just grew like crazy, and it was more than what our animals could keep up with, and so then it just deferred paddocks. And so we try and keep our rotation length up to what it should be for the right recovery period of the grasters, but what we couldn't keep up with we deferred. And then so since November, prior to this week, we'd had 45 millimetres of rain over 2.5 months, and so it was pretty dry, and we're pretty much right on top of all the land that we had been rotating through, and so the time came to then go into those deferred pastures. So, you know, if we didn't get this couple of inches of rain this week, then we still had plenty of feed for animals to get through the next couple of months.
So the focus of your grazing is really about rest period.
Yeah, and continually learning and tweaking, and it's making mistakes and adjusting and
Responding to what's actually happening on the ground. Yeah,
totally. So, but yeah, I think we're getting better at it, but we have got a long way to go. And and I have to acknowledge, Joshua White, who's our stock manager on the farm, and he's a young guy who has basically picked this up and is doing the planning for the farm, and I'm working with him and sharing my knowledge and experience, but leaving him to basically run the animals on a day-to-day basis. So that's pretty cool having young guys like that coming in and learning as well. Because we're returning so much back to the soil, it definitely is reducing the amount of fertiliser inputs that we're doing, and that's still an ongoing learning, just how much we can back off the fertiliser. And we're fortunate that we've got ag research involved on the farm now, and so I guess they'll put a bit more rigour around the data and production and pasture growth rates and stuff like that. But given that we're spending significantly less, I guess we used to be spending about $50,000 a year on fertilisers, 40,000. This year we're expecting to spend 15, and I don't really know if I really need that, but we're still got that crutch and still applying it. And
is that phosphorus?
No, that's mainly lime.
Yeah, right.
But it does, we're putting on about 10 units of P and a similar rate of sulphur going on, and then a little bit of selenium, which our animals need. One thing that we do is try and give our animals free choice minerals, although we haven't been giving them separately, but we are giving them minerals. And our hill country up there, where we can't get trucks or tractors, hasn't had fertiliser on it now for probably over 15 years. And what we try to do there again is just through the animal impact and giving those animals minerals so that they spread them around through the manure and cart them up hills.
Is it true that sort of, I guess, key to this system is it's about sort of understanding the interactions between animal impact and grass?
Yeah, well, like with pastures like this, and with our animals, and obviously there's a lot of concern around clean rivers and greenhouse gases, and just a great saying I got from one of my farming heroes, Joel Salatin. He talks about this being a carbonaceous vapour, and you can just see that the soil is covered, and the brown grass in amongst there is all the carbon, and so when some manure drops on it, it gets held, and my take on it is that this is mixing the carbon and nitrogen and producing a compost like on the soil surface, which with a healthy soil biology will get taken down into the soil, and that's part of our fertility cycles. And it's a balance, and we've got different classes of animals, and they've got different priorities. We've got some animals that have to be growing and putting on weight. We've got 150 dairy heifer grazers here, and we only get paid on the weight gain that they put on, so they have to be looked after a little bit more. And then we've got other classes of beef cattle and beef cows that will convert the drier, harder, more lignified pasture into production, albeit at perhaps a slower rate. See, like in here, there's quite a diversity of grasses. This looks like a prairie grass got growing there. You've got your ryegrass here. There'll be a bit of fog. There'll be cocksfoot, various clovers, and so that's all happening reasonably naturally just through the grazing.
Has there been a real change in diversity on the farm since you've sort of started doing all this stuff?
There has been, and probably in our pastures in a negative way, in that, you know, in the early days we were letting our pastures rest for way too long, and so some of our pastures we were resting too long have become quite cocksfoot dominant, and you know, realising our mistake now, and even we've got quite a lot of tall fescue on the farm, and that again you have to be really, you know, careful that we don't over rest it and it gets too, you know, hard and lignified and rough. So you know, different pastures require different sort of rest periods, and it's responding to that, and yeah, so definitely made some mistakes which we're now on top of, and aware that it's not just about those rest periods, but it's also about getting the animal impact and making sure that we've got enough animals on to get that trampling effect. And so that's a big one that we were missing in the early days as well, to make sure that, you know, the animals are eating, you know, a third or a half or whatever, and but yeah, they're trampling as much as possible as well. So that's another pretty important ingredient in this system.
And it seems like you also have, you know, quite a good diversity of insect life and things like that.
Yeah, I think yeah, with the taller pastures, it is beneficial to the insects because I guess they've got longer sort of breeding cycles or something, and opportunities to multiply themselves. And yeah, I think, you know, there is a lot of insects, and you get out here on a dewy morning, you know, there'll be a lot of spiders' webs, and you just love seeing all that diversity. We're very fortunate in this country that we've got, you know, both Gallagher electric fences and these ones here, Kiwi Tech. And you know, this is a great system because we do a lot of electric fencing, and so we are putting fences up and down every day. We're splitting more and more paddocks using a single wire into a semi-permanent system. You know, like this paddock here, we've got a double wire going down the middle, but you know, we are breaking them up. So all our animals are on at least daily shifts, and you know, I think this year we'll make an effort to be through the spring period doing at least probably 2 shifts a day, and that's just to get those animals to get the impact on the land, you know, a quick graze, move on. And so so that this system, you know, we can put a fence up like this in under 5 minutes, and you know, take it down in under 5 minutes, and say give them 5 minutes for the animals to run through and shift the water troughs, because we've got water through all these paddocks with a little hydrant, and so these portable troughs, again from Kiwi Tech, are shifted with the animals each day. And so, you know, the key to doing this is infrastructure, but it doesn't have to be expensive, because you can buy electric fencing systems and hydrants, and you only need, you know, a trough like that per herd, per mob, and you're in business. And so, you know, at the moment we've got about 750 cattle on the farm, and they are grouped into, this mob will be going in with another mob shortly, but they are basically in 4 mobs at the moment. And you know, given that, you know, if you're not travelling too big a distance on the farm, it takes 20 minutes to shift a mob, then, you know, pretty much your work's done in an hour and a half, providing you've got no issues with your electric fence or water system or something like that. But it's a really efficient way to move your animals. You know, even though, you know, you might think, you know, it's something that we do every day, and yep, I'm doing it in the weekends, but you know, we've got the scale where we've got an employee, you know, working with us on the farm, and so we can swap over, so we each take turns at doing weekend rosters, or as it turns out at the moment, weekends are my happy time, because that's when I get to get out on the farm.
And it sounds like it's just good because it's really adaptable, it's very flexible. You know, it allows you to respond to when things change, you know.
Yeah, and you know, you can be planning and you can be adjusting.
What's your vision for, you know, for this farm over the years to come? Like, you know, what do you kind of hope that it can be?
Okay, here's where I get kind of really, you know, out there, and that I just have a vision that you know, New Zealand Aotearoa, yeah, we pretty much live in paradise here, and it's been rather degraded over the last few hundred years. And you know, our journey is really all about just that restoring paradise, and whatever that may mean to people, but it's about restoring that balance. And you know, in these COVID times we live on the planet, you know, there's so much around fear and scarcity and that whole mindset. And really, I think, there is this opportunity, especially for us, we're appreciating that we are in a really fortunate position, just to live in abundance and joy and love and beauty, and I guess, a driver of what we're doing, or what anybody, is basically beauty should be at the basis of everything that we do. And for me, nature is beauty, and so the more of that we can have while maintaining, healthy, ethical, nutritious food systems, while creating beauty, then that's, I guess, the journey we're on.
Well, that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed it. I found it really valuable to get to spend time with Greg, walk the farm, hear his story, and really get a much deeper sense of exactly why he does what he does and what his thinking is behind it. It was really interesting to see the way Greg has integrated agroforestry elements into his system, and wonderful to just see the recognition there of just how valuable trees can be in a productive landscape. The benefits that trees bring, not just to an existing grazing system, but the opportunities that it can bring productively, economically, ecologically, supporting biodiversity, moderating wind effects on pastures, providing shelter and shade for animals, and of course all the things that you can get from them, I think, are really key parts of the system. So really, what makes Mangarara Station different from your average farm? Well, for one, they really value the connections, both on and off the farm. The idea that all the elements of that operation, that system, support each other. It's not pigs and cattle and trees and so on. It's all of those things working together like an ecosystem does. And I think that this is a really key foundational principle of what makes regenerative agriculture, ecological agriculture, agroecology, whatever you want to call it. It's what makes it work. It's the connections between things. So it was really great to see some of that being brought to life at Mangarara Station. I think it's been really key to their success so far, and I just can't wait to see what happens in future as they restore paradise there. So I hope you enjoyed it. Join me on the next one, and look forward to seeing you soon.